Universal consciousness is attained when a person has a lasting experience in which they see through their illusion of separateness, and lose their separate self-consciousness. Their consciousness then merges with the universe, thus they experience being one with the universe. This is often the result of going through a conscious psychological death experience, brought on by meditation and other aspects of a spiritual path. The illusion of separateness dissolves in the awareness of oneness. And with the dissolution of the illusion of separateness, the separate self seems to die, and a rebirth occurs. Separate self-consciousness is transcended and transformed. The dominant consciousness becomes that of the inner self, the part of us that is the universal spirit. Thus, we have universal consciousness. When experienced properly, a person is never the same, and never sees things the same way again. From then on, all things are understood in the light of the biggest picture, in the light of being one with the universal spirit, God. Selfishness thus becomes a thing of the past. This is also called achieving enlightenment, and a few other names. The difference between having separate self-consciousness, or having universal consciousness, is, like night and day. Consider an environmentalist who has expanded his or her separate self-consciousness to include concern for ecology. This is good. And if being aware of the flow and balance of Earth's nature is good, imagine the significance of being really aware of the flow and balance, of all things, of the entire universe. And if being concerned about all humans on Earth is good, what about being devoted to caring for all life within the entire universe? A person who has attained universal consciousness, has transcended separate self-consciousness, and thus sees infinitely more, understands infinitely more. Imagine being able to see the outcome of many of your actions in advance, or whether or not you see the outcome, being able to know if what you are doing is really going to ultimately help, or ultimately harm. That is just a small nothing. What if you really had an awareness of being one with everything, even the Creator, even all other separate selves? How would you see things then? And how would you treat everyone and everything? If you absolutely know that every person you are dealing with, is you, just in a different form, how will you treat yourself, others? Is there any point in stealing from yourself? Hurting yourself? Is there any point in being tyrannical with yourself? It would make no sense. There would be no point if you really believed that to be true. A being with universal consciousness loves everyone unselfishly, and is, within the needs of universal flow, giving, kind, compassionate, caring, knowing, and harmless. That doesn't mean incapable of defending the innocent. Why? Is it because the person has read something that made them that way? Studied to be that way? Trained to be that way? No. Maybe such things were stepping stones on the path towards attainment of that consciousness, but once there, the fact is that being any other way simply makes no sense to someone with universal consciousness. It is just their reality, it is just natural. It is similar with people at any level of consciousness. A basically decent person is not just trying to be basically decent, moral, or law-abiding. It comes somewhat naturally depending on what they have made of themselves throughout their lifetimes. And they can and will digress towards greater selfishness given the right situation. Everyone just manifests the level of their consciousness, and for most, it moves in a certain range, wavering between selfishness and unselfishness to varying degrees, and shifts at different times in their lives, and depending on the circumstances they are subjected to. It is as natural for a person with universal consciousness to be totally giving, as it is for a person with separate self-consciousness to be selfish. A person with separate self-consciousness is focused inward, and thus they are like an energy vacuum, a black hole, always trying to get energy. But a person with universal consciousness is focused outward, and thus they are like an energy beacon, a sun, always giving energy. So piercing this illusion of separation, and attaining universal consciousness, is the answer to the entire world's problems. If everyone had universal consciousness, there would be no need for the kind of governments we have now, for all would be governed as one from within themselves. Just imagine a world in which everyone is conscientious, caring, and responsible. And where such behavior is not coerced by threat of prison or death, or even convincing of any kind. No need for religions to try and influence people to behave morally. No need for police, armies, government, etc., because unselfish love and service to universal will is all fixed within every being. What paradise! We may never achieve this on earth, then again, we may. But there are planes of existence other than the physical plane on earth, into which only universally conscious beings can enter. Paradise does already exist. There are also major personal psychological changes that come from attaining universal consciousness. The seriousness and significance of things that you once considered very important, will change. How important such and such is, will now be viewed in a much greater light, and its true importance determined there. Things that previously may have upset you or been desirable to you, may lose their impact because they pale in significance when seen within the context of awareness of all things. For instance, how can the paper boy throwing the paper behind the bushes upset you very much, when you are truly and constantly in mental touch with such things as the starvation going on in the world, the fact that another species just became extinct while you were reading the headline, the vision of what will happen when the poles shift, what life is like when you have the consciousness of lava on Saturn, and on and on and on. Also, with such a radical consciousness change, some things that you may have previously taken for granted, or that you found enjoyable, can change dramatically, as far as how you experience them. For instance, how can a football game be very interesting when competition is senseless to you because you know we are all one, you know we are God? And worse, you know the game is actually reinforcing separateness, and hostility? All you see from your universal viewpoint, is a bunch of we who don't understand who we are, attacking themselves so some we can win and feel superior, and some we can lose and feel terrible. Take for example some beautiful flowers growing. You think nothing of them other than they are pretty. When I look at them, I know they may never bloom again. They could become diseased. They may go extinct. I may go blind. I appreciate them so much more because I am aware of these things. And when I don't see them anymore, or they die, I don't lament them, because I know they are living on elsewhere, because all life lives on. It is a paradox. When you have universal consciousness, you take everything much more seriously, and not seriously at all. Nothing can ever really be destroyed, or created. It can only change form. For all is one. Take you for another example. I love you. I truly am aware every moment that I may never see you again on earth. You may die tonight. I may have a stroke when I leave this computer, and be unable to communicate or even grasp your hand. So I appreciate you so much more, life so much more, and I cherish our being here right now. And thus I behave differently. If I were to fight with you, and say unkind things, or hurt you in any way, I know I may never get a chance to make amends, or even apologize, and that would be the way we ended our relationship here and now. Even if I wasn't aware that we are a part of each other, and you just aren't really aware of that, I couldn't do anything hurtful either, because I know this is it. This may be our last chance to be together in this way, or for a long time. And at the same time, it doesn't matter because we are all just the one, interacting, changing form, coming in and going out. The only thing that does matter really, is that those of you who think and believe and live as separate, are suffering. Suffering needlessly. And I feel for you, and want to help you. That is all I am really here for. But how can we really know all these things, and see all these paradoxical things? How can we keep them all in our consciousness, and be aware of them at the same time, and constantly, all the time? It just happens when your separate self gives up its illusion, surrenders its artificially, self-created life. And there are degrees of this. The closer you get to attaining universal consciousness, the greater your point of view will become, and the more you will intuitively see the whole picture, or whole situation. The attainment of universal consciousness is quite dramatic though, and you can't help but to see all these things, and be aware of them. But while a person who has attained universal consciousness may see the whole picture to the greatest extent possible on earth, even they don't see it all while still embodied. A completely all-encompassing point of view is not really possible while functioning in a physical body. We can achieve this in deep meditation, but when we again return to full physical plane function, we can only grasp the essence of what we understood in our ultimate point of view state. That is why we teach that getting out of our own way, and allowing ourselves to be an instrument of the universal spirit, is the greatest wisdom. This too, is achieved simultaneously with universal consciousness. It comes with the package. When we have thus become an instrument of the universal spirit, we are then always watched over by our ascended, hierarchical kin, and guided when necessary. This is not actually mediumship or channeling. It is still having only our own inner being in charge of, or in possession of, our body and consciousness. Our inner being is one with the universal spirit, and when we allow it to come out, and take control of us, we become an active link in the hierarchical chain of universally conscious beings. As a part of the chain, we are both led by the movement of the entire chain, and we become the chain. While we are still earthbound, and fettered by the limitations of the physical plane, others of our chain, our hierarchical superiors, are not so limited. They too unselfishly care for all life, but they are in a higher state of conscious oneness with the universe than we on earth, and have an infinite view. And as one, we can receive guidance from these other parts of our chain, these beautiful beings who have an unfettered all-encompassing point of view. They always know what is best, even if it does not seem so, to us, from our narrow point of view.